Hello, my dear friends. So, let's start the next part of the story of Prince Shabur. So, what happened? Still now we haven't been introduced with the main protagonist, that is Shabur. So, till now what we have seen? We have seen that the little girl, the seventh girl, she was left in the wilderness with her nanny, actually Daima. So let's see what happened next. The sun is up, you can now come out. So saying, the tree split itself into two, and the merchant's daughter and the old woman came out. They saw the extent of mischief done by the wild beasts to the tree. Many of its branches had been broken down. In many places, the trunk had been pierced, and in other places, the bark had been stripped off. The merchant's daughter said to the tree, "Good mother, you are truly good to give us shelter at such a fearful cost. You must be in great pain from the torture to which the wild beasts subjected you last night." So saying, she went to the tank which was near the tree, and bringing thence a quantity of mud, she besmeared the trunk with it, especially those parts which had been pierced and scratched. After she had done this, the tree said, "Thank you, my good girl. I am now greatly relieved of my pain. I am, however, concerned not so much about myself as about you both. You must be hungry, not having eaten the whole of yesterday, and what can I give you? I have no fruit of my own to give you. Give to the old woman whatever money you have, and let her go into the city hard by, and buy some food." They said they had no money. On searching, however, in the workbox, she found five Koris. Kori is a kind of seashells, and they were the first kind of buying means. This the first kind of money. It was first utilized in ancient India. The tree then told the old woman to go with the Koris to the city and buy some khoi. Khoi is a fried rice, a kind of rice form. The old woman went to the city, which was not far, and said to one confectioner, "Please give me 5 koris worth of khoi." The confectioner laughed at her and said, "Be off, you old hag. Do you think khoi can be had for 5 koris?" She tried another shop, and the shop, see, this is the tree within which the nanny and the little girl was within its trunk. Yeah, we can see it. So let's dig into the story next. The shopkeeper, thinking the woman to be in great distress, compassionately gave her a large quantity of khoi for the 5 koris. When the old woman returned with the khoi, the tree said to the merchant's daughter, "Each of you eat a little of the khoi, lay by more than half, and strew the rest on the embankments of the tank all round." They did as they were bidden, though they did not understand the reason why they were told to scatter the khoi on the sides of the tank. They spent the day in bewailing their fate, and at night they were housed inside the trunk of the tree as on the previous night. The wild beasts came as before, further mutilated the tree, and tortured it as in the preceding night. But during the night, a scene was being enacted on the embankments of the tank, of which the two women saw the outcome only on the following morning. Hundreds of peacocks of gorgeous plums came to the embankments to eat the koi which had been strewed on them, and as they strove with each other for the tempting food, many of their plumes fell off their bodies. Early in the morning, the tree told the two women to gather the plumes together, out of which the merchant's daughter made a beautiful fan. This fan was taken into the city to the palace, where the son of the king admired it greatly and paid for it a large sum of money. As each morning a quantity of plumes was collected every day, one fan was made and sold, so that in a short time the two women got rich. The tree then advised them to employ men in building a house for them to live in. Accordingly, bricks were burned, trees were cut down for beams and rafters, bricks were reduced to powder, lime was manufactured, and in a few months a stately palace like house was built for the merchant's daughter and her old nurse. It was thought advisable to lay out the adjoining grounds as a garden and to dig a tank for supplying them with water. In the meantime, the merchant himself, with his wife and six daughters, had been frowned upon by the goddess of wealth. By a sudden stroke of misfortune, he lost all his money, his house and were sold, property were sold, and he, his wife, and six daughters were turned adrift, penniless, into the world. It so happened that they lived in a village not far from the place where the two strange women had built a palace and were digging a tank. As the once rich merchant was now supporting his family by the pittance which he obtained every day for his manual labor, he bethought himself of employing himself as a day laborer in digging the tank of the strange lady on the skirts of the forest. His wife said she would also go to dig the tank with him. So one day, while the strange lady was amusing herself from the window of her palace with looking at the laborers digging her tank, to her utter surprise, she saw her father and mother coming towards the palace, apparently to engage themselves as day laborers. Tears ran down her cheeks as she looked at them, for they were clothed in rags. She immediately sent servants to bring them inside the house. The poor man and woman were frightened beyond measure. They saw that the tank was all ready, and as it was customary in those days to offer a human sacrifice when the digging was over, they thought that they were called inside in order to be sacrificed. Their fears increased when they were told to throw away their rags and to put on fine clothes which were given to them. The strange lady of the palace, however, soon dispelled their fears, for she told them that she was their daughter, fell on their necks and wept. The rich daughter related her adventures, and the father felt she was right when she said that she lived upon her own fortune and not on that of her father. She gave her father a large fortune, which enabled him to go to the city in which he formerly lived and to set himself upon again as a merchant. The merchant now bethought himself of going in his ship to distant countries for purposes of trade. All was ready. He got on board, ready to start, but strange to say, the ship would not move. The merchant was at a loss what to make of this. At last the idea occurred to him that he had asked each of his 6 daughters who were living with him what thing she wished he should bring for her, but he had not asked that question of his seventh daughter who had made him rich. He therefore immediately dispatched a messenger to his youngest daughter, asking her what she wished her father to bring for her on his return from his mercantile travels. When the messenger arrived, she was engaged in her devotions, and hearing that a messenger had arrived from her father, she said to him, Shabur, meaning wait. The messenger understood that she wanted her father to bring for her something called Shabur. He returned to the merchant and told him that she wanted him to bring for her Shabur. The ship now moved off itself, and the merchant started on his travels. He visited many ports, and by selling his goods obtained immense profit. The things his 6 daughters wanted him to bring for them he easily got, but Shabur, the thing which he understood his youngest daughter wished to have, he could get nowhere. He asked at every port whether Shabur could be had there, but the merchants all told him that they had never heard of such an article of commerce. At the last port he went through the streets bawling out, Wanted Shabur, wanted Shabur. The cry attracted the notice of the son of the king of the country, whose name was Shabur. The prince, hearing from the merchant that his daughter wanted Shabur, said that he had the article in question, and bringing out a small box of wood containing a magical fan with a looking glass in it, said, This is Shabur, which your daughter wishes to have. The merchant, having obtained the long wished for Shabur, weighed anchor and sailed for his native land. On his arrival, he sent to his youngest daughter the said wonderful box. The daughter, thinking it to be a common wooden box, laid it aside. Some days after, when she was at leisure, she bethought herself of opening the box which her father had sent her. When she opened, it was saw in it she saw in it a beautiful fan, and in it a looking glass. As she shook the fan, in a moment the Prince Shabur stood before her and said, You called me. Here I am. What's your wish? The merchant's daughter, astonished at the sudden appearance of a prince of such exquisite beauty, asked who he was and how he had made his appearance there. The prince told her of the circumstances under which he gave the box to her father, and informed her of the secret that whenever the fan would be shaken, he would make his appearance. The prince lived for a day or two in the house of the merchant's daughter, who entertained him hospitably hospitably. The upshot was that they fell in love with each other and vowed to each other to be husband and wife. The prince returned to his royal father and told him that he had selected a wife for himself. The day for the wedding was fixed. The merchant and his 6 daughters were invited. The nuptial knot was tied, but there was death in the marriage bed. The 6 daughters of the merchant, envying the happy lot of their youngest sister, had determined to put an end to the life of her newly wedded husband. They broke several bottles, reduced the broken pieces into fine powder, and scattered it profusely on the bed. The prince, suspecting no danger, laid himself down in the bed, but he had scarcely been there 2 minutes when he felt acute pain through his whole system, for the fine bottle powder had gone through every pore of his body. As the prince became restless through pain and was shrieking aloud, his attendants hastily took him away to his own country. The king and queen, the parents of Prince Shabur, consulted all the physicians and surgeons of the kingdom, but in vain. The young prince was day and night screaming with pain, and no one could ascertain the disease, far less give him relief. The grief of the merchant's daughter may be imagined. The marriage knot had been scarcely tied when her husband was attacked, and she thought by a terrible disease and carried away many hundreds of miles off. Though she had never seen her husband's country, she determined to go there and nurse him. She put on the garb of a sannyasi and with a dagger in her hand set out on her journey. Of tender years and unaccustomed to make long journeys on foot, she soon got weary and sat under a tree to rest. On the top of the tree was the nest of the divine bird Bihangama and his mate Bihangami. They were not in their nest at the time, but two of their young ones were in it. Suddenly, the young ones on the top of the tree gave a scream which roused the half drowsy merchant's daughter, whom we shall now call the young sannyasi. Sannyasi means, what should I say? Sannyasi means yogi. He saw near him a huge serpent raising its hood and about to climb into the tree. In a moment he cut the serpent into two, on which the young birds let off screaming. Shortly after, the Bihangama and Bihangami came sailing through the air, and the latter said to the former, I suppose our offspring, as usual, have been devoured by our great enemy, the serpent. Ah me! I do not hear the cries of my young ones. On nearing the nest, however, they were agreeably surprised to find their offspring alive. The young ones told their dams how the young sannyasi under the tree had destroyed the serpent, and sure enough, the snake was lying there cut into two. The Bihangami then said to her mate, the young sannyasi has saved our offspring from death. I wish we could do him some service in return. The Bihangama replied, we shall presently do her service, for the person under the tree is not a man but a woman. She got married only last night to Prince Shabur, who a few hours after, when jumping into his bed, had very pore of his body pierced with fine particles of ground bottles, which had been spread over his bed by his envious sister-in-law. sisters in law. He is still suffering pain in his native land, and indeed it at the point of death, and his heroic bride taking the garb of a sannyasi is going to nurse him. But, asked the Bihangami, is there no cure for the prince? Yes, there is, replied the Bihangama. If our dung, which is lying on the ground round about, and which is hardened, be reduced to powder and applied by means of a brush to the body of the prince, after bathing him 7 times with 7 jars of water and 7 jars of milk, Prince Shabur will undoubtedly get well. But asked the Bihangami, how can the poor daughter of the merchant walk such a distance? It must take her many days, by which time the poor prince will have died. I can, replied the Bihangama. Take the young lady on my back and put her in the capital of Prince Shabur and bring her back, provided she does not take any presents there. The merchant's daughter, in the garb of a sannyasi, heard this conversation between the two birds and begged the Bihangama to take her on his back. To this the bird readily consented. Before mounting on her aerial car, she gathered a quantity of bird's dung and reduced it to fine powder. Armed with this potent drug, she got up on the back of the kind bird and sailing through the air with the rapidity of lightning, soon reached the capital of Prince Shabur. The young sannyasi went up to the gate of the palace and sent word to the king that he was acquainted with potent drugs and would cure the prince in a few hours. The king, who had tried all the best doctors in the kingdom without success, looked upon the sannyasi as a mere pretender, but on the advice of his counselors agreed to give him a trial. The sannyasi ordered 7 jars of water and 7 jars of milk to be brought to him. He poured the contents of all the jars on the body of the prince. He then applied by means of a feather the dung powder by he had already prepared to every pore of the prince's body. Thereafter, 7 jars of water and 7 jars of milk were again 6 times poured upon him. When the prince's body was wiped, he felt perfectly well. The king ordered that the richest treasures he had should be presented to the wonderful doctor, but the sannyasi refused to take any. He only wanted a ring from the prince's finger to preserve as a memorial. The ring was readily given him. The merchant's daughter hastened to the seashore where the Bihangama was waiting her. In a moment they reached the tree of the divine birds. Hence the young bird walked to her house on the skirts of the forest. The following day she shook the magical fan, and forthwith Prince Shabur appeared before her. When the lady showed him the ring, he learned with infinite surprise that his own wife was the doctor that cured him. The prince took away his bride to his palace in his far off kingdom, forgave his sisters in law, lived happily for scores of years, and was blessed with children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. So, my dear friend, thus my story endeth. The Natia throne withered. So, আমার গল্পটি ফুরলো, নটি গাছটি মুরলো. So, my dear friend, today we have completed this part. So, again this story. So, the moral of the story is, yes, we are the creator of our luck. Somewhere luck surely matters to some extent, but still we have been bestowed with the free will, so we can choose the path which we feel we are comfortable in, and if we keep our faith within us and on the Almighty, then we are going to be successful. So, with this notion, today Shamita is asking for your permission to say goodbye. Tada! We will see you again in English segments, The Life of Masters on Friday. So, till then, tada!